Hey guys, welcome back. So today what we want to do is we want to look a bit more at functions again and procedures. And we want to look at what it means to pass a parameter by value or by reference. This is something that often comes up in exams, and you have to know how to answer the question, and you also know how to spot the difference between understanding if the question is specifically asking about local and global variables or what it means by passing by value and reference. It should be clear. So let's start by looking at what we did with local and global variables. If you remember, right, we said that if we have a variable outside of a function, and then what we do is we manipulate that within a function. So look, we've passed a value here. If we look at there, you can see that we've passed the value here as a reference in between our parentheses. Okay, which means that we are now trying to manipulate this from within the function, and we're saying now a equals a times 2. So a would have gone from 5 to 10, right? Now, when we print this, because we've run the function first, we've resulted in the line here that says, 10. We display 10. So a equals a times 2 is 10. And then after the function is run, then we run this print command, and it says that a is equal to 5, right? So what happened was, whatever we did inside the function, even though we run the function first, it didn't change the variable globally, right? So we spoke about local and global variables already. However, there's something that we need to understand, because in the exam, as mentioned, we're often going to be asked a question of what happens when we pass a parameter by reference, or what happens when we pass a reference by value. And that can be confusing because you need to understand that this will behave differently when I pass a list or when I pass a single variable, all right? And it also makes a difference depending on the programming language. Let's not speak about that for a moment, okay? Let's just go back to this for a second, because we've already looked at global and local variables, and we know that if we pass a parameter with just a single variable, we know that it shouldn't change that variable, the value of it globally, right? But when we pass a list, it behaves differently. Okay, so when we pass a parameter by reference and that parameter is a list, so if you look at this example here, we are passing a is a list, okay? And when we pass that here and we try to manipulate something, so we say we say num1, so that would mean this digit here, because we know that everything is indexed, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So we know that num1 is equal to 2. We're saying num1 equals num1 times 2. So that really, what it's now done, it should change that to 4, right? But here's the thing. If we were to run this, it will change the value globally. When we pass a list by reference, we're telling the function, hey, look at this variable here and make a change to that, because we're referencing where it is and what the exact value is. Right. So now what you can see in this example is when we pass by value, so now if we look down at this line, you can see here that we're not really passing a as a reference anymore. Instead, now what we're doing is we're directly passing a list. And what that does is in the RAM, that creates a new variable in a new location, and that becomes a local variable for this function, and it manipulates that new variable. It leaves the old one completely intact because we haven't passed that through as a reference. So this is the key thing that you have to remember. Passing a parameter by reference means that the function changes the original value which is stored in RAM. If we pass a parameter by value, what the program does is the program creates a new variable in RAM and manipulates that. Now, I just want to give an example of what happens when we pass a value by reference through a function. I know this can look a bit confusing because there's a lot going on the screen, okay? But as I said before, different programming languages behave in different ways. This is something that we need to consider when we pass a value through. So over here, you can see at this line here, we're making a function call, right, on this one. And we're passing a as a reference. So a refers to 5. So then what happens here is when we go into the function, we can see that on this line, we're calling that variable for the first time. And over here, I've used the ID function. the ID function gives us the memory location of that variable in RAM. And we can see that this is before we've done anything to the variable. On this line, we've manipulated the variable. We said a equals a times 2, okay? And when we look at the ID afterwards, what we can see here is that Python has created a new variable, okay? So it's taken a copy of the reference and it's left it, and this is local within the function, okay? Because when we print a, we get the value of 10, as you can see here. Now when we print a, that's the end of the function. You can see there's no more nesting here. So outside of that, we now go to this next line here that says print a. I'm sorry about my writing. And now we can see the value is 5. And if we look at the ID afterwards, we can see that this is now the original memory location again. So when we manipulated the variable here, we know that it created a copy of that variable and it stored that in RAM, but that was local to the function. So guys, I hope this isn't too confusing, but now what we have is a similar example, and we pass a value by reference. So there's our passing by reference, and we're passing by through a list, okay? And when we pass through that, we can see that before it's passed through, this is the ID. The ID ends with 872. Inside the function, before we've manipulated it on this line, we can see on the line above, the ID is 872. Now we've manipulated it, so we've made some changes. We've said A0 equals A0 times 2, so we're referring to that first number 2 there. We've times it by 2, so that should be 4. And then after we've manipulated it, if we look at the ID again, we can see that the ID still ends with 872. And then when we print the result of A here, we can see that that 2 got updated, but don't forget this print here is within the function. And then when we print A again afterwards, we know that it's made a change to the actual item in memory. So I know I've waffled on a lot, but it comes back down to this, all right? You have to remember, when passing a parameter by reference, if that's what the question's asking you in the exam paper, then you're going to have to mention that it changes the original value in RAM, okay? The original memory location. If you pass a parameter by value, you know that the function creates a new local variable and changes that. Okay, and to finish this video off, let's look at an example question from an exam paper. So you can see here that our procedure, we have a list item passed by reference. And then over here, where are we? Here we can see that in this part of the function, we make a change to it. So here, specifically, we're making a change to the actual data on the list itself, okay? And the question, if we scroll down a bit, so that's an example question I've given you. If we scroll down a tiny bit, we can see here the question says, state the effect of the array data being passed by reference and not by value. So to be fair, this is only a 1 marker in this case, but you should be able to explain that when we pass that list or that array as a reference, it should change the original value in memory. Otherwise, if it was passed by value, it will create a new local version of the list and it will manipulate that. So guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope I've made that easy for you to understand. As always, please check out the description in the video, go to the website, check out the questions and the tasks, and the more you practice, the better you get. And I'll see you in the next video.